Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here. I'm today with a quick review of Fena Pirate Princess episode 10 that aired last night on Toonami. Now I'm going to give some of my thoughts about it, some things I liked about it, some things I didn't like about it, and then tie it up with a big old bow at the end of this video. So, some of the things I really liked was, I'll say, this is kind of a weird way to phrase it, the artistry of this episode. This episode was a very spare episode for the most part. Most of the interactions were just dialogue between members of Fena and her party, and at the end, the thing I liked the most was the ending where, out of almost pure instinct, Fena did, like, the dance perfectly, which unleashed the exact code where how she ended up with her movements, where she landed, was the exact code to trigger the stairway to Eden. And another thing I like about this too, that's at least getting kind of brought up here is something that's actually kind of common in anime, and that's religious, particularly biblical references. Like like an example, when someone says the Bible in anime, first thing anyone thinks of is probably Evangelion for very obvious reasons. This episode, and we've mentioned this in the past, where like the place they want to go, where the sword of Kusanagi is called Eden. If you know, this is a very basic Bible knowledge. You know about the concept of the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve being expelled from it after committing sin. And I thought it was interesting too. And also note that there's a stairway you go up into Eden as well. That's intentional to be like more like the stairway to heaven in a way. And all these things are promised, like all these good things have been promised to people who can find Eden, so on and so forth. And Abel, who, oh, what do you know? Abel, that's a Bible reference right there. He wants to go to Eden because that's where Fena's mother, Helena, is. And she says, find me there, which implies that this place has some type of connection with the afterlife, as if this actually is some way humans can physically go to heaven without dying or something. And I thought that was really interesting. And this episode just kind of tied it up together a bit better. Another thing I liked better was, again, about Fena's dance at the end of the episode, was specifically how they contrasted that with Abel and his army finding this island and storming on shore. And I feel like if they could have really played this up a bit better, if they showed stuff like the soldiers blowing up mountains and stuff to find all the hidden passageways instead of how Fena's team did it by being more careful and deliberate. If they just blew their way in and it would like be able to contrast like the brute masculinity of war with like the sweet femininity of the dance that Fena was doing. Like, and again, and that would have reminded me of kind of how the very famous episode 8 of The Promised Neverland season 1 was, where you had the contrasting scene of the kids sitting down and having dinner. The kids that didn't understand that they were in a farm would have for like sit down for dinner, having a good time, and having Sister Crone being chased down and brutally eaten by demons. I thought was like it could have been something like that, and also probably the scene in general cinema that's kind of triggered that trope of the contrast at the same time with a song playing, being the baptism scene in The Godfather, where you have this sweet, emotional, religious moment where this kid is being baptized. And you contrast it with literally multiple gang shootouts that happen to be happening at the exact same time, ordered by the man who is witnessing his own, I forgot, his child or grandchild being baptized. I thought was something like that. I feel like it was a good scene. I felt like they could have just taken it up another notch right there. But again, no real complaints about the last 5 minutes of this episode or so. And also, I kind of things I didn't like about this episode, I kind of mentioned this before, it is a very spare episode, and at the same time, the dialogue seems very stilted, perhaps by nature, perhaps by intention, especially between Fena and Karen. They speak like 2 or 3 different times, and the only time it moves from, like, very quick, brief things where, like, they clearly both of them are very have social issues, like and it's been mentioned in the past, Karen can't really interact with people that well. She kinda has that mental block with that until Karen mentions, "So, what's with you and Yukimaru?" And then Fana just freezes up. That was the Really, that was the only good moment in the dialogue. The rest of the episode was, like, them just kind of talking between each other. Not much really happens, but at least they were doing something. It wasn't like them sitting in a room talking. It was them going on this island and eventually finding this treasure room. and then eventually Eden. So at least something's happening, so some credit there. And also, they do not give any explanation for how the British guys found the island. Did they just, like, stalk the ship, the Nostromo, whatever the ship, the submarine they're on is called, and just happen to be like, "Oh, they're docked here. Must be the place." Because at this point, unless they knew specifically of the song that Fena sung as a girl, they could have not figured out all the different things with why the coordinates are important and all that stuff, and located this island. Unless they might be like, "Oh, no, Helena actually taught that to Fena," but, like, Helena sang it as a girl too, and Abel picked up on it, and he somehow picked all the references and was able to deduce it for himself too and knew exactly. And then again, at the same time, he wouldn't need the female pirates to kidnap Fame in the first place. It's like, "Oh, I know the coordinates, I know everything," and he wouldn't even need to bother the female pirates in the first place, you know? And that's just and there's some other, like, small stuff like that, but this is an episode that if you're able to just turn off your, cynical part of your brain and just watch at face value, it does become a very enjoyable episode, and honestly, you could say that about a lot of Phantom Pirate Princess. And overall, I was pleased by this episode, and I am looking forward to the last 2 episodes, which will probably inevitably be it'll be something like an ultimate battle between the Gotham Knights and the British soldiers, and it'll culminate with, like, Abel, like, running into Eden, but, like, he's rejected, and he'll see Helena, like, wave him goodbye, and he'll, like, break down, and his mental state will just mentally just go to shit or something like that. Like, I see that coming. It'll be like Eden and like Fana will stand, her mother stand there, her father stand there, and they'll be like waving her to come. She looks back at Yukimaru. She's like, can you come? Like in deciding, because I want to be with Yukimaru, but I have this paradise in front of me. Do I want to delay paradise to be with this guy I love and clearly has shown he loves me too? Or do I want to get what I've really been going for? And it's going to be that trope, but I feel like the show has a potential to really pull that off. What do you guys think? If I had to rate this episode, almost forgot to give my rating. If I had to rate this episode, I would give it a good 8 out of 10. What do you guys think? What's your opinions, thoughts, comments, whatever about this episode of Fan of Pirate Princess? Are you excited for the last 2 episodes upcoming? Not oh, yeah, it is next week and the week after. Thoughts, opinions. I am the Super Orange Cat, and that is all.